I have to be honest with you, I only like to clean if it's there so bad and it bugs me, and after a while I just can't stand to look at it. I want us to turn to Mark chapter 11, okay? So what I'd like to do is we're going to see Jesus doing some cleaning, all right? He's not going to use Lysol. Instead, he's going to kick some people out of the temple, okay? And this will be quite interesting for us. So let's look at this. We're going to look at Mark chapter 11, verses 15 to 19, okay? Listen to what it says. It says, then they came to Jerusalem. Now remember, Jesus is heading back ultimately for the crucifixion. So a couple of weeks ago, he was in Jericho, had left Jericho, had come into Jerusalem, triumphal entry, has left, went back out to Bethphage and Bethany, and now he is coming back into Jerusalem here. It says he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he would not permit anyone to carry merchandise through the temple. And he began to teach and to say to them, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it into a robber's den. The chief priests and the scribes heard this and began to seeking how to destroy him. For they were afraid of him, for the whole crowd was astonished by his teaching. By his teaching, as they were passing by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered from the top roots. Now, it says when evening came, they were gone out of the city. So now I want to point something out here. This is the second time Jesus cleansed the temple, okay? Jesus did it in John chapter 2 as well. John chapter 2, starting in verse 13. And this is him cleaning out the temple prior to, again, his crucifixion and resurrection. So let's talk about this cleansing of the temple, if you would, for just a moment. So obviously, from John chapter 2, verse 13, it didn't take very long for the temple to have to be cleaned back out again, okay? Jesus in John chapter 2 had come down to Jerusalem for the Passover feast. They would celebrate the Passover feast. He was there. So here is another case in which he was heading to Jerusalem ultimately to become the Passover, to become the offering, right? He was coming to do so. And so here we read this in Mark, and we can see here that the religious leaders played a big role in this. And we need to remember that in our churches, guys, this is why it's very important in our churches. It does not matter to me what denomination this is, what I'm going to tell you has everything to do with whether or not they are Christians and believe in God and follow the Bible. But all our leaders in our churches must be very aware and pay attention to make sure the church does not become a house of merchandise, okay? And this is what the problem was here. The leaders created the problem, okay? Because the leaders were the problem, okay? They were the problem. So if you or I are the problem, we're going to be the creator of that problem. This is what's happening here in Mark chapter 11. And if you notice here, he says he came in, and one of the first thing that he did is that the religious leaders let people bring money in. It says there in verse 15. How many of you guys have ever been to Canada before? Okay. How many of you guys can remember, did you pay cash when you went to Canada, or did you use a credit card? Does anybody remember? Okay. If you ever go, use a credit card. If you ever do, use a credit card. Okay. Because when you use your credit card in Canada, the money changers, okay, will make sure your exchange rate is what it legally is. If you do not, and you hand them American dollars, which they gladly will take, by the way, one place might say, well, there's a 17% exchange rate today, and just down the road, the same day, they might say, well, you know, the exchange rate's not nearly the same as it was earlier, and they'll rip you off. So if you use your credit card, just some free friendly advice, okay? Use your credit card when you go to Canada, because then automatically the exchange rate takes place by your credit card company. So here we see, I don't get paid by Chase Bank or anything, just so you know, all right? But here we see the money changers. So what was happening is, remember, the Passover was there, right? So remember, people were coming from literally all over the known world at the time. And if you didn't have money that was used for the temple. You had to exchange your money to get coins to be able to purchase things in the temple. And one of the things they were purchasing was animals. Okay, so if you notice here, one of the first things he does, he says he entered the temple and began driving out those who were buying and selling. Should that tell us about the house of God? Should we be buying and selling things in the house of God? Okay, I don't think that's a good idea. We want to try to push that all the time, but we need to be careful, okay, because it can lead us into problems if we're not careful, because we literally can turn the house of God into a house of merchandise. Okay, so here we see this happening. Here we see them coming in. It's a little bit different than what we have today, because in their case, they needed to buy things for their offering. But here we see this, and he says he went in there and overturned tables. If anybody ever says Jesus never got upset, read these verses to him, okay? I want us to understand this. Sinning, turning tables over and becoming upset is not sinful, because if that's the case, Jesus was not a perfect sacrifice, okay? Because he got upset more than once, did he not, in the scriptures? He got upset with people, and here he is. He throws these money changers out. He gets rid of this merchandise that were there, and he wanted to, he did this market, literally a religious market, has begun to form here in the church, in the temple itself. And Jesus was so upset about this. This had everything more to do with, well, you know what, this is a convenience for these worshipers when they come in. So Jesus is going to do some cleaning of the house. Now remember, the first place, if you notice here, that Jesus starts out with is with the doves, okay? And so we'll get into that in just a moment, talking about why did he start there? Do you realize there's a difference between a religion and a relationship? Okay? Many people confuse going to church with having a relationship with God. Did you know that? Many people do. And they'll come to church and think, I did my part. I feel better. I went to church. Okay? And there's a difference between a religion and a relationship with God. So here we're seeing these people who are having a religious experience with God, a religious experience in the temple. And let's face it, this made them feel good. Okay? This made them feel really, really good. So these, again, the chief priests, the leaders of the temple, allowed them to come in here and to exchange money at whatever rates that they wanted to do, and to make amazing profits off of it, okay? Because remember, if you came in and I said, you know, that money you gave me, it's not worth nearly as much as you think. You're going to give me more. Are you going to question it? No, you're not, because you're coming to give an offering and a sacrifice. So this is what they would have done. So again, they come into this religious market. Now, one of the places here, if you notice here, in verse 16, it says he would not permit anyone to carry merchandise through the temple. The one place, there was places in the temple that only Jews were allowed to go to, and there are places in the temple only Gentiles were allowed to go to. And they weren't allowed, and they weren't supposed to be doing work in the temple. They weren't supposed to be doing this. So this is what exactly was happening here, and they went around and they were doing these things. So again, instead of the Jews who, again, many of them who rejected Jesus Christ, the Jews who very much are ones who are God's chosen people, right? They were God's chosen people. Should they not have been the positive influence on these Gentiles coming in? Instead, they're ripping them off, right? Instead, they were ripping them off. And that's not something that Jesus Christ, was taking very lightly. So again, here we see this religious market that's set up. This place should have been a place of, if you notice there, Jesus said in verse 17, this should have been a house of prayer. Why do we come to church? Why do we come to church, right? It's to worship, right? And worship involves praying, singing, hearing the Bible, worship, and also we come to church for fellowship with each other, right? That's another reason that we come to church. So here we see these guys that they have done the opposite of this. He said, you have turned my house into something it is not supposed to be, that it is wrong that was there. So here we see this, and these people they weren't taught like they're supposed to, these religions. Remember, a religion is going to teach a man-made system of what it is we're supposed to believe. Okay? So these priests were more about what? Money. Lining their pocket. Making sure they were comfortable. That's what they were more interested about. They were not interested in making sure that people really were able to become there and worship. So again, he said, if you notice there, he kicked the money changers, tumbled the money changers over. He would not allow people to permit any merchandise to come through. But let's go back to the Old Testament for just a moment. And I want us to see why Jesus Christ especially was so upset about what was happening with those who were selling doves, okay? If you would, it's Leviticus chapter 14. All right? I want you to see this because there was a system that the law had put in place that you could, if you didn't have certain, if you could not afford let's just say a sheep or a lamb, you could use a dove, you could use something in its place if you didn't have any or you could not afford to do so. So here in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 22, it says this to you and I about this. Listen to what Moses wrote about these doves. And it says, as soon as I can get my pages unstuck together here, again, it's 14:22, and it says this. And 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, which are within his means, the one shall be a sin offering and the other a burnt offering. Does everybody make the same amount of money? There's a lot of people who love it if everybody all made the same amount of money, but we all don't make the same amount of money. Which that means those of you who are multimillionaires, you can afford your Lamborghini that you drive, right? Or you can buy your multi-million-dollar home that you live in, right? Can we not? I mean, is that true? Most people who are super rich, is that what they do? I'm not knocking it, that's okay. But could any of us afford to do that? No. And why not? Because we can't afford it. I mean, it's just that simple, okay? And God understands economics. Did you guys know that too? God understands economics. And so, since God understands economics because he made economics, he knows that there's certain things that we cannot afford, and there's people who live in other places in the world who can't afford even the things that we have, okay? It's not about being wealthy here for God. It's about making sure you're capable of giving the offering. And these people, if you notice what it said there in Leviticus 14:22, he says that, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, which are within his means. In other words, this is what you'd be capable of being able to purchase to give as a sacrifice, as an offering to me. That's what he was getting at right here. So who were the religious leaders taking advantage of, the rich or the poor? The poor. Okay, and Jesus realized this. He realized that they are taking advantage of the poor. So this is where he started with his cleaning of the temple. He got these. They had to tell them enough is enough, and we need to remember that. And that is something that is there. If you go to the Old New Testament, please. Let's go to Luke chapter 2. Okay, Luke chapter 2, verse 24. And I want you to see something about Jesus Christ. Here's what it says again. Luke chapter 2, verse 24. Okay? And to offer a sacrifice according to what was said in the law of the Lord. A pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. If you go back up, this is what Mary and Joseph offered as a sin offering. They weren't wealthy people. Okay? Jesus was purely a humble servant. He was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was not given everything. I mean, even his own parents, earthly parents, had to follow this. So that's something that I find it very, very interesting that, people don't think about that Jesus Christ was a lowly servant. And his parents were humble, lowly people as well. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It simply means they're humble people. And sometimes there's a lot of people out there who have so much money, they need to be humble a little bit too to understand things, right? And we as Christians, we need to be humble to make sure we can relate to one another, that we can relate to who God is. So here he is. There's a religious market taking place, guys, in the temple of God. That's what was happening, a religious market. And the thing is, too, is that we've got the priests that are involved in that. We'll get into that in just a moment. When Jesus Christ, there in Mark, verse 17 of chapter 11, he quotes from Isaiah chapter 56 and from Jeremiah chapter 11. And when he's quoting from there so that he's exposing who these religious leaders really are. They weren't interested in a place of prayer. They weren't interested in a place of worship. They were only interested in how much can I get out of it? What can I get out of when these people come into the Passover festival? What can I get out of it as a religious leader? And many of them became very, very wealthy, and many people started to resent religious leaders. Okay, so that's what Jesus is getting at here as well. So we need to remember that if we also look in, and we're not going to, but you can write this down if you'd like, but in Psalm 141 verses 1 and 2, okay, those verses, as David wrote to us, also are a reminder of praying to God as a sacrifice as well. Okay, many times we're scared of sacrifices. I talked a little bit about that this morning. We'll expect other people to sacrifice, but we're hoping they sacrifice enough so we don't have to. Okay, I'm hoping that maybe somebody else will give a little bit more than I do, so that way it kind of balances itself out. Okay, that's sometimes attitudes that we can have if we're not careful. We need to make sure we give a sacrifice and we love who He is. Now, let's talk about this religious leaders. Do religious leaders always have a great reputation in the community? No, it's unfortunate, but you're right, they do not. And especially in Jesus' time, that same problem was there. So if you notice what Jesus comes at here, if you notice, Jesus said here to them, if you would, go back in Mark chapter 11, I want us to see what happens here as we look at this. He says to them in, I'm going to make sure I find the right verse here, that they have turned it into a house of merchandise. He began to say to them, it is written, my house shall be called this. And the chief priests and scribes heard this and began to seek how to destroy him. They sought to destroy Jesus Christ over money. Did you catch that part? Over money. That's why they wanted to destroy Jesus. Okay? They wanted him out of the way because they could get more money if that troublemaker wasn't there trying to set it straight, saying this is not what it is, how you're supposed to live. So again, Jesus Christ come in here and he's cleaning out this temple, and the chief priest, and they did all evening came and all of this. And now one of the things here that Jesus Christ says, we have made my house into what? A house of robbers, there at the end of verse 17, a den of thieves is what it also can say there. Does anybody know who hides out in a den of thieves? Thieves, right? Okay, so here we see he's comparing these priests to thieves, to robbers, and here they are. And what they're doing is they're using the temple to cover up their behavior. They're using the temple to cover up the bad things that they're trying to do. In fact, it's almost like they're not quite doing it, but maybe it is. I'm not certain of this. But I think that they're almost money laundering here, okay? They're trying to trying to take this money and made it into something that it should not be. So again, and they're trying to cover up their hypocrisy. They're trying to cover up their sin. Look how good we are. Come on, we help these people. They got their doves, and I mean, come on, right? And so that's kind of what these priests and these chief priests and these others working in there were trying to do. And it's something that we need to be very, very careful of, to make sure that our heart is right with God, so we don't try to rip each other off, okay? And don't think for a moment we won't try to rip each other off in our churches, because we will if we're not careful, okay? And we hear that happening all the time. Churches being robbed by their members. I mean, I have read stories of, I know I've listened to people before talking about how church treasurers would take money, they would take cash and put it in their pocket, and the church had no idea how much money was there because they don't count the cash. They took the cash and they left, and one lady got caught for over $100,000 she had stolen from the church. Okay? So we can't think for a moment that this still can't happen today, because it can. All right? So we just need to make sure we don't turn our house into a den of thieves, but into a house of prayer and a house that worships God. So here we have them. They're following these chief priests. They don't like Jesus Christ. So if you would, stay in Mark and go back to chapter 14 for just a moment, please. I want you to see something else here that's happening. You have to love these priests. You have to love they're always conniving, right? They're always trying to do something. But listen to this, okay? They have come in here, and they have decided that they've decided, because he called them out, he said, get this out of the church, out of my house, may turn my house back into what it's supposed to be. And because that's what he did, they said, we've got to get him, okay? He's taking away our money, taking away our ability to have wealth. We got to get him. So they're going to get rid of him. Look at 14 verses 1 and 2. It says, now the Passover and unleavened bread were 2 days away, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to seize him by stealth and kill him. Okay, now they wanted to kill him because there was jealousy, there was envy, there was also, hey, he called out our sin publicly. He is trying to take away what we've worked so hard for. How dare he? Okay? Now, then he goes on, for they were saying, no, not during the festival, otherwise there might be a riot of the people. Why? Because the people saw who Jesus was. They knew the true Jesus, and the priests knew that there's no way they're going to be able to convince the people at the festival. Because what did many of the people want Jesus to become? A king, right? Literally a king. So here's what is happening. The leaders, again, I find it so interesting when you're reading through the New Testament and you read about the Pharisees, you read about the scribes, you read about the priests. They were so crooked. I mean, they were so crooked. There were so many people turned away from God because of those things. I mean, in my lifetime, I think of, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, right? All right, what is it, Swaggart? I can't think of it. Was it Jimmy Swaggart? Is that okay? There's a lot of different people who just took the money and people just kept giving it. How many of you guys, I hope, don't raise your hand if you did this. Oh, just just send me $100 and you'll have a blessing come in your life. Just put your hand on the TV and make sure you send me your money. Everything's going to be great. I hope nobody bought into that, okay? All right? But isn't that what religious leaders will do? I mean, here they are. This is what they're trying to do. And Jesus called them out, and they're like, you know what? No more calling us out, buddy. We're going to kill you. That's what they said. We're going to kill you. We hate you. We're going to get rid of you. But not right now, because too many people who know who you really are outnumber us. The right moment wasn't there yet, was it? The right moment wasn't there. So that's what is beginning to take place. They decided, hey, you know what? We've got to get help. So who did they get help from? An insider. Insider trading is not new. Did you guys know that? Okay? Judas was an insider trader. Not the same kind on Wall Street, but he was a trader. And he was the one who was going to sell out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Isn't that funny? They were griping and complaining about money, that he was taking away their money, and then they threw up more money to get rid of the person who was losing money for them. So they were probably thinking, well, you know, we'll get it back. Okay? Over and over again, and when you read about this, greed is a huge factor in the behavior that these individuals had towards Jesus. All right? So that's what we see this taking place. And Jesus like, you know what? We can't do this. Guys, I want you to think about your life. How many people live, I guess, for lack of better terminology here, phrase, you've probably heard this phrase before, weekdays they're devils, Sundays they cry. You guys ever hear that before? Okay? Live how you want to during the week. I'm going to live what I want to. I'm going to party hardy. I'm going to do whatever I want to. I'm going to cuss all I want to, drink all I want to. I'm going to do whatever I want to during the week. But when I go to church, I'm going to boo-hoo. I'm going to boo-hoo. That's what these priests were like. I'll live how I want to over here, but boy, when I get to church, boy, I'm going to make it all right. So they walk out the door Monday morning and start a cycle back over, and it never goes away if they don't want it to. This is what these people are doing here. We need to remember that when you look at our church, when you look at the church down the street, when you look at the churches across the country, how do people see the church? Okay? Do people see the church as a place that we take God serious? Or do they see the church as, you know what, those are nice people? Okay? Because being a nice person has nothing to do with getting into heaven. All right? And if all the community around sees churches doing as being nice people, then we have lost the influence on our society. Okay? Because there's a lot of nice people that I see out there that are not Christian. Am I right? There's a lot of nice people, but they're not Christian at all. So we can't just be known as the nice church. The nice people who go to the nice church. We've got to make sure that people know that that's the church that loves Jesus. That's the church that cares about me. That's the church that wants my life to be better. That's the church that's genuine. Okay? That's what people need to know. And it's amazing. And guys, I want you to know something. One of the dangers of churches and Christians, of us living in the past, is we think that ministry works the same way now as it used to. Okay? And the reality is only bits and pieces and parts of it do. In fact, the only part that really still works is Jesus. That's it. How we give a message is completely different. As I shared with you guys this morning, next Saturday, you're more than welcome to come to the apartments with us. But when we first hit the apartments last September, I believe it was, guys, we got into the apartments and many, many people were skeptical. You could see people up in their windows and they were looking down and they're like, who are those people? Who are those people? Okay? And in fact, we had people who lived there who came. They said, there's a lot of people watching you. You know what they told us? They want to make sure you're genuine. They want to make sure that if you say you're going to be here, that you're here. You see, and yesterday, we had way more new people than we had last September. People who said to us more than once, I've been watching you, I've seen you out here. Okay? I'm not trying to lift anything up about the people that went, but guys, faithfulness is huge. Reaching out to people is huge. And we can't play the game that the Pharisee or the religious leaders were playing here of, well, we'll just get out of what we can get out of it. Okay? And so I want to encourage us, let's make sure we understand, let's not be like the world, especially like the world in front of the world when we claim to be Christians. We're all going to fall, am I right? We're all going to have times of stumbling, and that's not what this is talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. There's going to be times that happens. But let us not be weekdays, we live how we want to, and we feel bad that Sunday comes around, we show up for church. Because that the world sees right through it. And the world, listen, when you read there in Mark chapter 14, the world saw right through those religious leaders. Because they said, we better not do this now, because they look at him as a good person. They look at him as a person they can trust. Okay? That's why they wouldn't do it at that point. Now, if you would, let's pick this up in verse 27 of chapter 11. Okay? So now we're going to see here that Jesus had conversation. He's now getting back out. He's come back to Jerusalem. It says this. As he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him and began saying to him, by what authority are you doing these things? You have to love these guys, don't you? By what authority? Or who gave you this authority to do these things? And Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question, and you answer me. And then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Answer me. They began reasoning among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, then why do you not believe him? Did not believe him? But shall we say from men? They were afraid of the people, for everyone considered John to have been a real prophet. Answering Jesus, they said, we do not know. And Jesus said to them, nor will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Now it's interesting here that here we see them asking Jesus about his authority. Okay? Who gave God his authority? God. Okay? Nobody gave God his authority. He is the authority. Nobody gave Jesus Christ the authority. He is the authority. He is God in the flesh. No one gave the Holy Spirit authority. He is the authority because he is God. He is Jesus combined in the Trinity. He is that authority. So here comes these guys. Now remember, these religious leaders are shallow. They're scared. They're scared of Jesus. Okay? And they're looking at Jesus and they're saying to Jesus, how dare you question our authority? Because you know what, we didn't read this, this is what they're thinking. I'm telling you right now, if you read more about these leaders, we get our authority from Moses, from the law. That's where we got our authority from. This is what they would have argued, but they couldn't. See, they weren't stupid people. Did you catch that? They weren't stupid people. They're like, if we answer this way, then this is going to happen. If we answer that way, then this is going to happen. Okay? They were thinking, they're trying to think this through. So here we see them, again, they are religious leaders that have become more political in how they did things and how they answered to people. So now, their job was to know the law. I want to go on here in chapter 12, and I want you to follow along to me with, please, down to verse 12. And he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a wall around it, and dug a vat around the winepress, and built a tower, and rented it out to vine growers, and went on a journey. At the harvest time, he sent a slave to the vine growers in order to receive some of the produce of the vineyard from the vine growers. They took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent them another slave, and they wounded him in the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and that one they killed, and so with many others, beating some and killing others. He had one more to send, a beloved son. He sent him last of all to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But those vine growers said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." They took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? Will he come and destroy the vine growers, or will he give the vineyard to others? Have you not read the scripture? The stone which the builders rejected, this became the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to seize him, and yet they feared the people, for they understood that he spoke the parable against them, and so they left him and went away. See, they were completely ignorant men. They were completely stupid. They knew exactly what they were doing was wrong, and they knew Jesus caught them. Did you catch that? He caught them. He said to me, he didn't say these words, but they said it, "This is you." Who were the previous people that came? Prophets, other people throughout history that God sent to the world to bring the world to him. And here we see this, that they understood exactly what it was that was going to take place. They knew exactly who was going to be the troublemaker and who they had to get rid of as far as they were concerned. So here we see this taking place. Were they interested in the truth? No. They were only interested in getting rid of Jesus, who was the way, the truth, and the life. They wanted to get rid of him because in getting rid of him, they thought their problems would be better. Again, they're not stupid men. They knew when to arrest him, when not to arrest him. They took their opportunities. They planned. They got an insider with Judas. So here they were making these plans. They were conniving. And by the way, guys, through what we're reading, all about money. That's what this boils down to right here in these passages. All about money, questioning their authority. How dare you question our authority? Who do you think you are? Jesus of Nazareth, a son of a carpenter who has no education, who has nothing. Okay, this is what they thought so highly of themselves. This is what it had. This is what it was. Now, John the Baptist was rejected by the people, wasn't he? He lost his head. He lost his head for preaching the truth. And we need to remember here that God, these Jewish leaders, they could not accept what John the Baptist taught. They were not going to accept what Jesus taught. And the only way they're going to get any normalcy in their life was to get rid of those troublemakers as far as they were concerned. So let's get rid of the truth, and let's keep the lie perpetuated on the people. That's what they wanted to do. Let's keep the lie there, because if we keep the lie there, then the people will buy into it over and over again. So the Jewish leaders here with this question got themselves into a little bit of a predicament, okay? They had got themselves in a little bit of a predicament here. They're like, okay, Jesus wasn't asking what is true. Jesus was not asking, and they were not asking what is right. But they were trying to answer what is safe. What is the safe answer to keep us out of trouble? What is the safe answer to make sure this crowd that's around us will continue to give us the money that we want, continue to keep the peace around the temple that we most certainly want, because we can't have any dust up with the Roman soldiers, the Roman government, because they will take care of the problem. They didn't go to appellate court. They didn't go to the media, say, look what they did to us. The soldiers came in and they cleaned house. Okay, what you did not do is cause problems for the Romans, especially in Judah. Judah was known as a troubled province. Okay, so they knew better. What is it here? What is the safe thing to do? How can we do this? So they need to, these hypocrites who are supposed to be telling people about the people about Jesus, training them about God, showing them God when we're interested in ripping them off. Okay? We're interested in ripping them off. And that was a problem that was going to, that they had to make sure that they got rid of, and they needed to do so. Now, remember here, Jesus was not trying to be evasive in his response. If you don't answer me, I'm not going to answer you. What Jesus is trying to do here, Jesus was trying to get them to accept and to be honest with themselves about their motives, be honest with themselves about their actions and their answers to his question. This is what he wanted them to do. And let's face it, honesty with ourselves sometimes this can be very difficult to come with an answer. But this is exactly what it was here that they were trying to do. Now remember, he talks about this vineyard that is there. He gave them an opportunity to get away from their problem, and he begins to talk about a vineyard. This is where he's trying to do so. Now you have to remember the vineyard was the image of Israel. You can read about this in Psalm 80 and Isaiah chapter 5. And in Leviticus, there's all kinds of things, laws that are written to the people, and that the farmer wasn't always allowed to use the fruit every single year. That they planted things, even though the produce would have come onto the plants, they weren't always allowed to use those. So here we see this. They had to be able to make sure that if they're going to keep their property and keep their vineyards and other things, they had part of the produce had to come back to them. And yet this is exactly what is happening here. There's a problem because they are not ready to answer those questions. They're not ready to take responsibility for what it is that is happening around them. So they refused to, and they killed prophet. And if you notice here, they killed servants that came in after him, because we'll show him. And eventually, you know what? We'll kill them all. Eventually, he'll quit sending people because we're just going to kill him. Okay? But yet, that's exactly what happened. This is what happened. They came in, and they were like, you know what? We're going to question the authority. Who had the authority, the vine dressers or the owner? The owner did. He owned the vines. The people taking care of it did not. They had absolutely zero authority to tell the owner what. No, none whatsoever. But yet that's exactly what they did. And so we need to remember, and this is what Jesus is getting at here. He says, you know what, I am the authority. We can read, because we have the advantage. We can read this. We can find in Genesis, we can find that Jesus has always been. We can find in the Psalms that Jesus was prophesied to come. We can find it throughout the historical evidence is found throughout the scriptures that Jesus was going to come. That because he was God in the flesh, he had all authority, and there's no way they were going to accept that. So again, they were not going to answer this question, but answer this question. So what does Jesus say to them? Jesus says to them, you know what should this landowner do to these people who refuse to give to him what is rightfully his? What is he going to do? And Jesus over and over again reminded them of what it was that was going to happen. Now remember, we find that Jesus Christ had done the triumphal entry. They didn't like the fact that he was coming in as king. They tried to stop that from taking place. They tried to stop his servants and the followers to follow through with that. So now we see here. Now we're going to see, and we're going to close with these last few verses here in chapter 12, verse 13. Okay, so now again, they would not answer. They're mad at Jesus. We've got to get rid of this guy. Again, but this time they decided we're going to get away, and we'll try it again another day. Okay, verse 13. Then they sent home some of the Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in a statement. They came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are truthful and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any, but teach the way of God in truth." Don't you love the way they work? I mean, you got to love the way these guys work, right? They would do the people who went off, the people who ran off. They were literally saying, "Whose authority are you doing this by?" Right? And now these other people, these guys come back in, and they're trying to trap him, and they're saying, oh, you're truthful. Well, if he's truthful, then why are they questioning his authority? If they really believe he's truthful. Well, they don't. Okay, they might say that, but they don't believe it. So here they see this happening here, and he goes on and continues. Says, we know you're truthful, you defer to no one. Then they said, okay, is it lawful to pay tax to Caesar or not? Verse 15, shall we pay or shall we not pay? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius to look at. They brought one, and he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. Jesus said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they were amazed at him. Isn't it amazing? Every time they tried to get Jesus, every time they tried to trap him, they went away amazed. They went away like, wow, where does he get this knowledge from? Where does he get all this from? Remember, he was just a carpenter's son. He wouldn't have been well educated. He didn't need to be. He was the Son of God, but the Bible tells us he learned. Does it not? He was in the temple learning from the priests and others in his early childhood. We know that those things took place. So here we see the Pharisees and the Herodians, and they hated each other. Remember historically, over and over again, enemies would join forces if they both had the same person they hated. Okay? So here they are. They both hated Jesus. They didn't like him. They didn't have anything to do with him. Remember, because some of them he's taken away our money. Some of them he's taken away our followers. And so with that, we cannot have them around. The Herodians supported the family of Herod. Okay? They did so of Herod. And that's who gave them authority. And the Pharisees consider the Herod to be a bunch of evil people who tried to circumvent to get rid of that throne of David. Remember, the Old Testament tells us that David, there'd always be a king on the throne, right? So they don't like each other. I mean, here they are, don't like each other, but again, they hate Jesus even more than one another. So here they are getting together. This is what you see happening with them. And it's interesting here that Herod was not even a Jew, okay? Herod was an Edomite, okay? He was not even a Jew at all. He was an Edomite. So here they are supporting an Edomite, one who was would be present day. I'm going to try to get probably like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, that part of the country where he would have been from, where Herod would have been from. But he's an Edomite. So again, the Pharisees proposed a tax, a poll tax that would have caused problems with people coming through. It would cause problems with potentially with Rome if they didn't pay their part. So here they are, and they're thinking, we'll get Jesus. We'll get him. Is it right to pay taxes? Is it right to do these things? Don't you love that answer? Jesus is like, well, whose picture's on it? He didn't say it was his picture. It was Caesar's picture. And literally, what does he say to them? He says, and since it's his, give to him what is his. Now, they were really playing politics here is what they were doing. So politics is not something new in 2023. They're playing politics, and they're trying to get him trapped in a political fight here because they know if they can get Jesus to go against Caesar, that's going to be a problem for him, okay, and his followers. So Jesus is not going to fall into this trap. He is going to literally say to them, you know what? Whose picture is on here? Whose inscription is on here? And literally, he literally looks at them and says, you know what? Whose authority? Who made that coin? Caesar. Caesar did so. And so here they are trying to get him to buy into this. None of us like to pay taxes, right? But nonetheless, what do we have to do? Pay taxes, okay? So here we are. I want you to take in verse 17, okay? There's a word rendered there. It says, and Jesus said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That literally means to pay a debt to pay him back, okay? So if we owe the government something, we're supposed to do what? Supposed to pay it back, okay? All right, so this is what he's saying to them. So he's saying, give back to Caesar's what is him, because what is supposed to happen with tax dollars? And we all know, and I'm not trying to be political here, tax dollars are meant to support the citizens of the country that the tax is collected for. Am I right? That's, in a nutshell, that's what it's supposed to be. Okay, so here we see this tax being taken so that the people of Rome could be taken care of. The soldiers could be paid, the roads could be taken care of, the aquifers for water, infrastructure could be taken care of. Sounds a lot like today, right? Okay, we have a gas tax. What's the gas tax supposed to do? It's supposed to pay for infrastructure, our roads, right? What's our city tax supposed to pay for? Well, it's supposed to pay for water. It's supposed to pay for infrastructure. That's what it's supposed to be. The concept is not new, but how we divvy it out and spend it is not how it was originally set up. But nonetheless, here we see this taking place. They're thinking, you know what? Hey, we're going to get this guy. Says, oh no. No. You got to give back to Caesar what is Caesar's. Again, none of us like that. But guys, if we want police protection, do you know how we get that? By taxes. We want fire protection. How do we get that? By taxes. If we want city water run to our houses, how do we get that? By taxes, right? Taxes are not a bad thing, and a bad thing when it comes to what they're originally set up for. The problem with them is that when ultimately they keep you stuck, it goes further than what they're supposed to be. And this is kind of what they're trying to say to Jesus, trying to say to Jesus, well, you know what? Are you sure that's what we're supposed to do? Are you sure that's not supposed to be for more than that? So again, we have to remember that. And if we don't like the way our tax money is spent as American people, do you know how we fix that? We vote. Okay? And they didn't have the case with Caesar. They paid to Caesar, and that was just the way it's supposed to be. And here we see this taking place, that here we see them trying to get him to say something bad about the government so that in turn they can ultimately use that against him. Okay? So we're going to close right there. We're going to continue this thought next week. We're going to continue to see how these guys who don't like each other, who are still going to try to get Jesus, yet over and over again. I love that what it says there. It says, and they're amazed. They're always amazed at Jesus. I'm just going to close in word of prayer, Brother Donnie, okay? They're always amazed at the truth that Jesus gave. And because they didn't believe that truth, they caused problems for Jesus. So let's pray. Father God, I thank you for the fact that you love us. Lord, let us take your word and let it sink in and challenge us and change our lives as individuals and as your church. Lord God, I just pray for anyone here tonight, Lord, that if they're struggling with who you are, Lord, that you open up their hearts to you. Lord God, I pray that Lord, you will help us to remain faithful. Use your church, use your people, so that we can, in turn, help people hear about you and change their life because of you and your power. And once again, Lord, I thank you for your word, and I ask these things in your name. Amen. Thank you guys for coming tonight. I sure hope we'll see you back here on Tuesday and Wednesday, okay? Thank you.